Welcome to this Degenerate Friday edition of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff DeForest. Very happy to have you guys with us. We're going to be joined by the professor today, handicapping some college basketball. Has some hot plays for you tonight, and also looking ahead to over the weekend, a couple of big games on Saturday that he has an opinion on. So looking very much forward to that. And we'll also have a big board with the professor as well, which has become part of a Friday feature here on the show. If you are betting games, Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform, your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, this is your ultimate game day companion. Bet Online with the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball, the NHL, UFC, big boxing card coming up on Saturday. Bet Online continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, every knockout, Bet Online has you covered with the odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every victory. Bet Online, the game starts here. All right, we often talk about signs from the gods of gambling. You have to be able to interpret, if you're going to be successful at this, you have to be able to interpret the signs from the gods of gambling. And they don't necessarily come in, there's a little bit of mysticism, a little bit of the occult involved in this sort of thing, trying to interpret exactly what the gods of gambling are trying to tell you. Now, last night, of course, the country was riveted to an exhibition hockey game as the NHL, in somewhat of an innovative fashion, took what was always a lackluster, albeit for a long period of time, it was an annuity for degenerates because you could always bet the over in NHL All-Star games and count on cashing a ticket. So they come up with this Four Nations thing, and because of the fact that they duked it out as if it was a WWE Raw event, a wild conclusion to a WWE event, broke out before the game even started between the U.S. and Canada in the preliminary round, the round robin portion of the tournament. Everybody was anticipating just a wild affair in this final. And the betting action, I would imagine, was relatively evenly divided as both teams were minus 110. There could have been many angles that you would have pursued, not the least of which might have been that U.S. won the first go-round. Canada probably going to come back and find a way to scratch out a victory in the second meeting between the two teams. And oddly, both essentially would have won on the other's home ice. The first game in Montreal and the second one taking place last night in the professor's favorite place, TD Garden in Boston. But if for a sign, Professor, before this game started, I would have thought, and I didn't catch this because I wasn't as enraptured and involved in the fanfare over this game as many other people around the country. I know you, this would have been the last thing on your list to watch. But there was a telephone call from Trump, apparently, to the locker room of the USA team.
Of course there was.
And if you were looking to identify the loser in this game, as soon as he picked up the phone, and you knew what direction this call was going in, which you're assuming he's not calling Canada, because I would imagine his thoughts and feelings are rather unwelcome there. In fact, I thought he might drop the gloves with Trudeau before the game started. That would have been a great way to start things instead of dueling national anthems. And as soon as he made that call, was that not a sign from the gods of gambling that the USA was doomed? I mean, would you had not run straight to your bookie and bet, even though you weren't inclined to watch the game, had no interest, and you could care less about hockey? I know your opinion is not particularly flattering about the game itself, but the Trump phone call, was that not a signal from the gods of gambling that the USA was doomed?
You knew when the USA was doomed, Defo? You knew when you 100% knew that the USA was doomed?
When it was in Boston.
When, as a nation, we started paying attention to Canadian soccer. And not just Canadian soccer, the Canadian Soccer All-Star Game. Who the hell cares? How bad is the sports hole now that people actually got like wrapped up into this? Oh my God, the NHL does it right. All-Star Game. You know what? The All-Star Game is a goddamn awards show.
Yes.
Sports has the ESPYs, so I can't say it's the most pointless thing we do in sports. But after the ESPYs, All-Star Games are the most pointless thing we do in sports. And everybody's fired up trying to make it like this nationalist event. Who the hell cares? It's Canadian. We're playing them at their sport. Who cares? Honestly. I didn't understand how people got so fired up about this last weekend. All through the weekend, it was a rematch with Canada. Yeah, again, We do this in the Olympics every 4 years. We don't need we're not soccer. We don't have to keep inventing this crap so we play other nations in their sport. Who the hell cares? Like it's so nah. Anytime America gets fascinated for 5 seconds with Canadian soccer, I feel like it's. Do you remember in the '80s when we got fascinated with Australian culture for like 5 minutes and everybody was talking about Crocodile Dundee and that bullshit, and it encouraged the Australian people to like spend money because they thought America was into their pop culture now. Like, don't do that with Canada. Don't get those people thinking we're interested because next on the goddamn Food Channel, Guy Fieri's gonna go, do a show about poutine, and Brian Adams will do a goddamn tour through America. You're gonna see Canadian singers coming to your arenas. You don't want that. Don't encourage these people. Don't pay any attention to their culture because it's totally absent and should be ignored by America.
I think you're onto something. I mean, look, poutine is maybe as highly overrated a national food as you could possibly get.
Right. Again, every nation in the world cooks French fries. There's not a place you can't. Only Canada manages to make them disgusting.
You're a beer connoisseur. Labatt's, Molson's, ever on your list of choices?
Again, Canadian beer was a thing like 30 years ago before the rest of the world decided it could also brew higher alcohol content beers. And then Canada lost their only point, food and beverage wise for existing. That was the only, positive Canada has ever introduced to the food and beverage scene.
Yeah, it's fucking cold there too.
Right? Have you ever seen those bagels? Like those bagels look like they were cooked by a short bus kid. Like,
yeah.
Just look at them and they're terrible.
Ethics too. I mean, would have to come into question. A lot of people think that from an ethical standpoint, Canadians have it all over. Greedy, heartless pigs like we have in America, but not true. Anybody in the United States that plays Tennessee and South Florida knows that any French Canadian, your ball goes to their side of the court, it's going to end up in their pocket. And then they're going to deny it, too. As they're playing with 6 balls and you're there going, hey, anybody got a pen 4? And a guy, I mean, you have to turn them upside down and shake the ball out of their pocket.
And if you've ever had any, not just French Canadians, any Canadians in your restaurant.
Oh, geez, yeah. The tipping thing.
Not just the tipping thing. Your table is going to be looted like New Orleans after Katrina. If you give them that little box of sugar pack, you could give them raw sugar and they will pour it into their pocket. You give them the shaker and they will pour it into their pockets and take it with it. You're lucky if you get the plates and forks and knives back. Like,
as soon as you hear the accent, if you're a server, bartender,
it gets picked over like a Best Buy during a riot. Like, not only are they going to tip, they're going to take the goddamn glassware with them. They're going to take the salt shaker and shake all the salt out, put it in their pocket and leaves. Yeah.
And then a couple of Canadian dimes come on a $200 check.
Well, I give you a
and they thank you on the way out the door. As they
were. Oh no, they're very polite people. But yes, if you have a restaurant, they will loot everything in. You're lucky if they don't try to take the jukebox on their way out.
All right, we have a lot of ground to cover. 3-0 last week on the show here as college basketball selector, and we were talking yesterday with Mike Jones about the fact that our first couple of guys up this week on college basketball weren't faring so well. We were combined 2 and 4.
I could see it was kind of up and down week. You couldn't get a favorites or dogs vibe. It sort of bounced back and forth.
And that's kind of been the nature of the season, is it not, Professor? Although you're 3-0, you certainly crushed it.
There's been a few teams I think you can trust, but it's sort of what's probably going to make for an interesting tournament. Is yes, you have Auburn's been very reliable. Duke has been somewhat reliable, although really the competition level in the ACC, not so much this year. But yeah, it should make for an interesting tournament. There'll be a couple of favorites that everybody's looking at, but once you get beneath that, could be very wide open this year.
I loved your enthusiasm. We were talking earlier about some of the games on tap for the weekend, including a couple that you have circled on your ticket tonight.
On Friday night, yeah, you got Marquette going to Villanova, laying 1.5. Marquette won by, I believe it was 13 at home a couple weeks ago. And I think that was a Friday night game, too. If you happen to watch it, it wasn't probably as close as the final score. Marquette actually got up like 18 or 20, and Villanova, I want to say it was like an 11-point line. Villanova pushed back towards the line and then back. And then Marquette sort of separated at the very end there on free throws. I don't see a lot of difference here tonight. I don't think Villanova has the size, which is sort of the formula to beat Marquette, is to slow the ball down and dominate the boards. I don't know that they've got the personnel for that formula. I like Marquette here. And, you look at Villanova, people got kind of fired up about them making a late push for the tournament after they beat St. John's week and a half, 10 days ago. But they have not followed up on that. Took 2 losses since, including a loss to Providence, which is just a loss to a shaky team. And then a UConn game where they were in the game the whole time, ATS, only to give it up at the very end. I think Marquette is a better matchup than those two teams were for Villanova. So I think you got to like Marquette here, 1.5. Take the Golden Eagles. Don't be afraid to lay on a Friday night.
All right, and a very colorful matchup coming up. Tom Izzo and company going against our former FAU head coach, now doing a good job with Michigan, Dusty May. Both teams seem to be coming on. They're maybe not top tier, but certainly belong in the whatever conversation you're having about possible long shots, maybe in a tournament to at least make a run somewhere deep into the tournament. Michigan State and Michigan doing
Yeah,
battle.
interesting matchup here. You have, in many ways, the most Sparty team of all time. Like, this is sort of a culmination kind of team for Tom Izzo, and that there are absolutely no stars on this team. But he can run like 8 or 9 guys who all sort of seem like the same guy out of you. He's got like 8 players who average between 8 and 12 points. So if one guy gets into foul trouble, it doesn't really hinder their efforts in particular. If they have a star, it's Jason Richardson's kid, but he's only averaging like 11 points a game. So again, Sparty can just sort of come at you in waves. And you look at Michigan having a surprising season, took a bunch of close losses early, but have now sort of parlayed that into their winning a bunch of close games as the season wears on. Although they did take an ugly one a few weeks back against Purdue, which to me is sort of the indicator here that Michigan may be a little fortunate in terms they seem to catch teams coming off of games over and over again this season. And that's why we like Sparty in this one. I think Sparty's looked better against quality opponents than Michigan has. Obviously a rivalry game, so, take a little caution there. But Sparty catching 2.5 points here. If we're catching points with Sparty in this spot, I think we got to take them. But should be a very interesting matchup here. I think Sparty's depth ends up taking the day in this one, in what I expect to be kind of a war of attrition. So Sparty plus the 2 and a hook.
Kind of similar to those John Thompson Georgetown teams with David Wingate and everybody else looked like they came out of the same mold.
Yeah, after Ewing left, and they sort of had 8, 9 guys who very similar could just keep coming at you and keep coming at you.
Yeah, they'd send them out in waves. They don't average 12, 13 points a game. And tough to distinguish who was who, but with that kind of depth, in open defiance of what you would think would be the normal model for success in college basketball, which
particularly these days, with
yeah,
it's more of a star-oriented game.
sure.
But again, if somebody was going to have a team like this, who is dangerous despite not having a star, you would expect it to be Tom Izzo.
All right, and a couple of games we don't have the numbers on necessarily yet, but that you're looking at on tomorrow's slate.
Yeah, unfortunately, in this new app-based environment, it's tough to get early numbers on college basketball, even preview numbers. But a couple we're looking at tomorrow. Iowa State goes to Houston. Iowa State coming bounce back off a tough week where they lost 3, a tough 2 weeks, where they lost 3 with 4 wins. But against the lesser opponents of the Big 12, Houston, on the other hand, has only lost once since maybe January or December. I mean, Houston, they took a few losses early and have sort of rolled into the Big 12. A couple of nice wins in the last 2 weeks, going to Arizona last Saturday and coming out with a win in a game that was really a war, and then coming back and beating Baylor on the road. Cougars look like they're going to once again roll into the tournament with everybody having big expectations, which largely, again, they haven't gotten the championship, but they've got a Final Four. They've got a couple of Final Eights. They have not disappointed in that role. So I would look toward the Cougars. We don't know the number for sure right now. But if it's where I expect it to be, would be somewhere around 3.5. I would look at the Cougars. I would also look, again, don't know what the total is going to be on that game. Kind of tough to predict because Iowa State has been more up-tempo this season than in the past. But if you can catch a a decent number to go under on. These are two teams historically in big matchups that tend to play very intense defensive matchups. So again, catch less than like 150. I would, catch like 150 or above. I would definitely be looking to go under in that spot.
All right, and Kentucky and Alabama. Anything
Another one, again, I think you're getting Alabama as a discount after losing to Auburn. And honestly, at some points in the second half, looking like they were getting handled, kind of, and then just giving up the world against Missouri, could not give up a defensive spot. I think you'll get Alabama in a favorable position here. Home game, bouncing about against Kentucky team coming off a nice win. This one, the number's tougher to predict because Kentucky numbers have been really all over the place this year. But if you can get a favorable number on Alabama at home, I would call it favorable less than 5, 4.5 or less. And again, I can't really predict where this number is going to land. I would be looking to bet Alabama again to as they would say in horse racing, bounce off of a couple of losses.
All right, excellent stuff. The Professor, ladies and gentlemen, college basketball also featured now on these Friday editions of Bury Your Bookie. Segment that I think is just absolutely brilliant. The Professor been doing this for a while in various formats on other shows that we do. And I particularly like the direction that you're going in this week, even though it came from a suggestion from one of our frequent viewers and a former media critic who said, hey, why don't you do something on the most boring athletes of all time? And you took him up on this proposition.
Yep, came from the great Jim Sarney, who suggested after we had a discussion about one of the athletes on the list that we do a big board of the most boring athletes in the world. We're letting you know this is not an all-time list. This is just current athletes list. The all-time list would look a little bit different. But the big board of the most boring athletes in the world, and that takes us to number 5, one of the biggest stars in the NFL, but all we know about Joe Burrow is about his goddamn haircut. One of the best quarterbacks in the league, always in the discussion for top quarterback, and all we know is they got his haircut to look like Ellen DeGeneres. Like, you got to be a pretty big, boring guy if your hair gets this much discussion.
Yes.
Right?
Not much else going on there.
Again, he's a guy you almost kind of hope has something interesting and secret that he's ashamed of going on. I mean, he does live in Ohio, so presumably his house has got a basement. Maybe something exciting's going on in that basement. It would be just nice to know that there's something interesting about this guy other than his Ellen-themed hair.
I always think of Timothy Robbins, Shawshank Redemption, when I see Joe Burrow. But you're right. He does have a colorful wardrobe, kind of interesting, a little weird. So there might be some tendencies there that we find out about later on. I don't know if he's inclined to just, treat most masseuses and people that are giving massages as if he was Bob Kraft at that Asian spa in Jupiter. But you're right. There isn't much out there about Joe Burrow. We know nothing about him. It's fantastic, except that he can throw the football. All right, that's number 5, Joe Burrow. Number 4.
Number 4, one of the highest paid athletes in the world, plays the world's most popular sport, and we know absolutely nothing about Erling Haaland of Man City, other than the fact that he looks like a combination of every Nazi propaganda piece and every Russian villain in 80s movies ever made. This guy is so boring that if you go to his Wikipedia page, the second line about his personal life is Haaland really enjoys meditation. How boring do you have to be that your most notable hobby is goddamn meditation?
If it was medication, it would make more sense.
What are you, Baba Yogi from India in 1968? Like, meditation is your big thing and it's 2025? I mean, how boring is that?
He does look like the epitome of, and we mean this in no disparaging fashion, not passing any judgment, but I always thought of Matt Carruthers, FanDuel TV, as somebody that could have easily come out of a Hitler Youth propaganda photo, but
right.
But this guy's right there.
He
You're
completely
exactly right.
is. He's 6'4" and blonde haired and blue eyed. He again looks like every piece of Goebbels propaganda from World War II. But he's also completely dominant. He's shattering every scoring record the Premier League's ever had. He plays for the team that has dominated Europe for 10 years. And we know goddamn nothing. Ronaldo's like 45 years old and playing in a Saudi league that nobody cares about and has We know every detail of his goddamn life. Messi went off to the MLS hoping to be ignored, and we know everything he does in Fort Lauderdale. Like every time he shows up at goddamn Einstein's Bagels, we get pictures. This guy, all we know about him is apparently he likes to meditate. Like
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what's going on.
We don't even know if he likes cinnamon raisin or garlic bagels. All right, that's number 4. Number 3.
Number 3, a guy who absolutely dominated the NBA for a good 3 or 4 year stretch there. Maybe a little bit less now because of the injuries, but Kawhi Leonard is so goddamn boring that when the internet learned he actually laughs, it became a thing for like a year. For like a year, all you saw was that video clip of him laughing with that horse laugh he has.
Yes.
That's somehow the most interesting fact about Kawhi Leonard is that he laughs like Steven Urkel for some reason. This
He
guy
does.
is so boring that his sister was in a murder trial for 3 years, and not your standard murder trial. Her and her compatriot robbed an old lady and beat her to death in a casino bathroom. And he's so boring, we didn't even know about that until she got convicted at the very end.
Even the dogs are reacting to that. Yeah, we didn't know he could smile. Where did you find that picture? Is that artificially intelligence generated?
I don't know. I assume it's right before he laughed because it's the only time it's ever happened.
Very low key, almost seemingly detached from anything else that would be going on that would be even remotely exciting. All right, that's number 3. Kawhi Leonard, among the most boring athletes of all time.
Number 2, and this is a guy who, by all rights, should be one of the most popular people in the world of sports, one of the best known figures in the world, but is so boring that most of Mike Trout's Twitter account is dedicated to conversations about the goddamn weather. And I'm not joking with this. I went and looked for something interesting about Mike Trout, and all I could find was a Reddit thread that demonstrated that like 14% of his tweets all time are conversations about the weather. Again, this is a guy who for like 5 or 6 years was off to the best start in the history of Major League Baseball, was on his way to becoming the greatest baseball player who has ever played. He plays in Southern California. He's a good-looking dude, and all he wants to do is sit around and have conversations about what he learned on the Weather Channel this week.
And especially thinking about it, in Orange County, California, where the Angels play, the weather's the same 300 of 365
Right?
days of the year.
And again, you go back to that Mitch Albom book, The 5 People You Met Beat to Heaven. For Mike Trout, 4 of them are going to be people from the Weather Channel. It's going to be goddamn Brian Norcross. I mean, what the hell, Mike Trout?
Might want to have dinner with Ginger Z or whatever. She's being featured heavily on the internet as some kind of babe. But yeah, you're right. Completely boring. A guy that could be the most dominant baseball player in here. Shohei Ohtani hasn't uttered a word in English except I'll take the Sixers minus 7.5.
Right? Shohei
And
Ohtani.
we know more about him.
He doesn't speak English, and we know more about him than we know Mike Trout, other than Mike Trout's deeply passionate about the cold front that's moving in over Minneapolis this week.
And there's no question who tops the list. I don't think anybody could dispute this.
This is not a debate, and that is number 1. Scottie Scheffler is so goddamn boring that when he got arrested, I wanted it to be something dark and mysterious. Scottie Scheffler is a 28-year-old dominant professional athlete whose passion in life when he's not playing golf is playing goddamn pickleball. You're a 28-year-old who made more than $100 million last year, who spends his free time in the park with senior citizens because that's the rest of people who care about goddamn pickleball.
And a game devised by an orthopedic surgeon. Unbelievable.
Scottie Scheffler is so boring that when he got arrested last year, I wanted it to be because he had taken over the cartel from El Chapo. I wanted it to be that he had taken all his golf money and become an arms dealer with it. I wanted it to be we found Scottie Scheffler with 4 hookers and 3 kilos of cocaine in the car. No, what was it? It was a goddamn traffic violation.
An illegal U-turn.
Not a good traffic violation with like Tiger Woods. He got pulled over,
right?
And he was high on every pill you could stuff in your face, and trying to do the walk a straight line thing with the cop. No, nothing like it. He made an illegal left-hand turn. Like And even his game is boring. Like again, I don't love Bubba Watson. There's you get the shot where they hook it and it goes around 4 trees and goes through branches and lands. No, Scottie Scheffler, middle of the green. I mean, middle of the fairway, middle of the green. Like even his game is boring. Everything
Yeah.
about this man is dedicated to be the most boring robot golf player of all time. If you replaced Scottie Scheffler with a robot, which is like not even a human looking robot, just like an arm that swung a golf club and hit it right in the middle, would anybody notice? Would there really be any notable difference?
No, no. I mean, you were hoping there were 2 kilos of coke in that car. You're right. That would have
Again,
made it a much more interesting story.
easily the most boring athlete. Honestly, he's the only one on this list that if I did most boring athletes of all time, he would probably make it, and he would probably be top 2 or 3.
Yeah, it's amazing as accurate and dynamic a driver with a driver in his hand. Tiger Woods was that he couldn't drive worth a shit. I
Right?
mean, he's crashing into fire hydrants when Haaland's chasing him down. He rolls a car off the freeway into a ditch and a gully. And then, of course, that incident in West Palm Beach where he had the mugshot where he looked like Nick Nolte. That was, I mean,
Again,
at least he made a sobriety test exciting. You're right.
I don't necessarily expect golfers to be the most exciting people
All out of the
because
same mold. Yeah,
to
boring.
get to that level of the PGA, you have to spend so much goddamn time practicing golf that you probably didn't have much of a life until you made the PGA Tour. I understand that. I don't expect everybody to be Phil Mickelson. I understand that part of it, but at least most of those guys play an interesting game. Even Scheffler's goddamn game is boring. Oh, Scotty hit another one,
It
290
is.
yards right down the
Right
middle of
down
the
the middle.
fairway.
Yeah.
Look, he played it over that bunker and in front of that bunker. He set himself up for an excellent approach shot there. Like everything about the man is boring. It's like an AI program designed to be dull.
And this is what we're, looking at to carry the game of golf into the future there and attract young people to, become involved in the game. All right. Excellent, Professor, as always. Good picks tonight, we hope. Marquette laying 1 on a hook over Villanova. 2.5 for getting with Michigan State, the Spartans over Michigan at Dusty May. And then looking tomorrow to Houston, possibly, depending on the number, but somewhere around -4 to prevail over Iowa State. And Alabama laying 5 or less, if that's the number, against Kentucky. Great stuff last week with the 3-0. Congratulations on that. Let's keep going and getting them in college basketball. And thanks so much for being with us. Always a
You have a
pleasure.
great one, Dave.
All right, the Professor, ladies and gentlemen. All right, we're looking for redemption there after 2 and 4 week. I was trying to track Mike Jones. He was kind of all over the place. It wasn't really college basketball so much last night, but he went up in flames with his Philadelphia 76ers. And also, I think took it on the chin in another game. So we were having a rough week here on Bury Your Bookie. Hope it smooths out over the weekend. We'll ride the hot hand of the Professor. People, thanks so much for being with us. We will see you on the next episode, Monday edition of Peel Yourself Off the Mat, Monday edition of Bury Your Bookie.